is AM Agenda.
G'day and welcome to the program. I'm David Lipson. The Prime Minister has declared the decade of 9/11 over. As well as the rise of China, it'll be cyber security that will dominate the attention of our intelligence agencies in the years ahead. The Prime Minister is expected today to announce more details of a national security centre for cyber attacks, or to try and thwart attacks on vulnerable infrastructure, and also to try to stop cyber espionage.
All of that is at risk, and it's at risk not just from nation states in the traditional sense, it's at risk from criminal hackers, from individuals, from individual organisations or non-state actors. And one of the purposes and points of the National Security Strategy has been to bring all of our efforts in this area essentially into one umbrella.
Let's go straight to our panel. Labor MP Nick Champion and Liberal MP Kelly O'Dwyer. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First to you, Nick Champion. The word on everyone's lips seems to be cyber security. In regards to cyber security, seems to be China, but the Prime Minister, of course, won't utter that word. How do we balance the relationship between such a crucial trading partner and someone who's seen to be something of a cyber threat?
Well, look, I don't think that's an appropriate analysis. We know that cyber threats can come from a host of state and non-state actors, and it can be anything from a disgruntled sort of hacker to a country. So I wouldn't make the links between one particular country and the cyber threat. I think it's a fairly broad threat. It's one that we have to be cognisant of. There's plenty of stuff in popular fiction, of course, about it. There's plenty of spy novels about it, but it's a very real threat because it can potentially disrupt a very important and critical civil infrastructure, things like the electricity network. We need to be aware of that. I'm sure it's a bipartisan effort to make sure we combat that, and the government's actions are simply looking forward and trying to, if you like, preempt the threats and protect us from them.
How bipartisan is it, Kelly O'Dwyer?
Well, certainly, David, it's right to say that we should be aware of cybersecurity threats. This is not new. Nothing, in fact, that the Prime Minister said yesterday was, in fact, new. She was talking about closer engagement in the region. She was talking about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity was something that I talked about in my own maiden speech. Certainly, these are all areas that we need to focus on. But the real thing is that it was all talk yesterday, and we have seen no real backup of the talk with any real action. The government has talked for some time on the need for increased spending, for instance, on defence. In its own 2009 defence paper, defence white paper, it said that we needed to increase defence spending by 3% in order to properly take into account Australia's national interests. Now, we did agree with that. We did actually have a bipartisan position on that. The problem is, though, that the government has turned around and completely and utterly rejected that. It has, in fact, cut defence spending by more than $25 billion, more than $7 billion this year. In fact, it is the lowest level as a percentage of GDP that we have seen since 1938.
So why won't the coalition commit to increasing defence spending then?
Well, what we have said is that the government have, in fact, trashed our economic position because they have trashed the budget. We have seen incredible waste and mismanagement from them, and cumulative deficits that they've delivered now of over $172 billion. We need to get the books back in order, but we do believe that defence is a priority area. Under us, under the previous coalition government, of course, we did increase defence spending in real terms year on year by more than 3%, because we recognise that we can't simply have a strategy of hoping that nothing will happen. We need to ensure that Australia is in the best placed position to react if something does in fact happen. And this is something that was warned of by the former Secretary of the Department of Defence, who is now our ambassador over in NATO, where he said Australia is not now appropriately positioned because of these cuts.
Nick Champion, why did the government promise to increase funding to defence and then do the opposite?
Well, look, I think the key to defence spending is making sure the money is spent efficiently. I mean, one of the things that the previous, Kelly talks about is how they increased defence spending, but they don't actually talk about the efficiency of that spending. And what we know internationally is just pumping money into defence doesn't automatically generate security. You've got to make sure that those dollars are spent well. We're clearly at a critical time in our defence posture. We're withdrawing from a number of very serious engagements, Afghanistan, Timor, the Solomon Islands, and so this is a period of consolidation for defence and a period where we position ourselves for the next lot of strategic challenges, which are clearly things like cyber threats. Clearly, the economic growth in Asia is going to fuel military spending growth as well, and what we want to make sure is that we've got not just the right defence posture, but the right diplomatic posture and the right national security settings to make sure that this country is secure.
Well, we know that the budget is tight, and today Heather Ridout, the RBA board member, has suggested that the government engage in, well, active management of the economy. That's being read, those words, as a sign that interest rates may go down. But she was also more specific, Nick Champion, about infrastructure spending, roads, rail, ports and the like. Is there any room for the government to spend more on this important infrastructure that would, of course, stimulate the economy further?
Well, we are building infrastructure. I mean, we've got a rather large freeway in my electorate that was built by this government. We've got, in South Australia, we've got the Superway on South Road, which is a $1 billion project that's being built, and I'm sure there are other projects around the country, and we're the first government to really take infrastructure seriously in a long time. So I think we are meeting the infrastructure challenge. The most important thing, I think, about some of the economic data that emerged yesterday is that inflation is contained, that unemployment is low, that interest rates are low, and I think what we need now, or the Reserve Bank needs to look at, is the level of our dollar and what we all can do to bring that high currency down, or to take the pressure off the high currency, because we know at the moment we're seen as a safe haven around the world. Our currency and our bonds seem to be safe investments, and so we have this flood of international money investing in the Australian economy, and that is putting a lot of pressure on manufacturers and exporters.
Kelly O'Dwyer, the figures out yesterday did indicate that inflation is very much contained. Is it going to be hard for the coalition to fight this election on the cost of living if inflation's not really going up that much?
Well, on that very question, I mean, the government would like to tell everybody that everything's rosy, but if you actually knock on any door in my electorate or in any electorate around Australia, I think you'll find that most families are really struggling with cost of living pressures. You only need to look at the CPI figures to know that electricity costs have gone up dramatically by just about over 17% this year, and they have gone up since the Gillard government has been in power by more than 89%. Now that's having a direct impact. Why have they gone up? Well, of course, a very significant contributing factor to that, of course, is the carbon tax. Now we know that in order to take off these pressures on families who are having to cope with these increased electricity bills is to actually scrap the carbon tax. A carbon tax that, by the way, this government said that it would not implement before the last election. The Prime Minister made it a promise, and of course she can't be trusted on her promises. So we recognise that this is something that needs to be tackled. We've said that we're going to do it, and we've told people how.
Kelly O'Dwyer, I know that in your state over the past couple of days in particular, health has been a big issue, health funding in particular, and quite a spat between the state and federal governments over who's to blame for the cuts to hospital and health funding that has seen waiting lists blow out and other problems in the system. What is the case that the Liberal government in Victoria is making to blame the federal government for this? Is there a bit of mutual blame that could be attributed here?
Well, the Commonwealth, of course, in Victoria have cut more than $1.6 billion to hospitals, which is now resulting in a number of our major hospitals in Victoria actually shutting down beds. You know, there can be no more significant impact than that. We heard only today, it's on the front page of the Herald Sun in Melbourne, that the Alfred Hospital has talked about the fact that it is going to reduce elective surgery over the Easter period for around about 6 weeks, but it may well be longer. This, of course, is going to lead to an increased blowout in waiting lists. It's obviously going to have a direct impact on health care and on patient care. This comes over the top of announcements that have already been made by the Peter MacCallum Cancer Hospital that it is going to have to shut beds. It comes over the top of the fact that the Geelong Hospital is going to have to shut beds, and it comes off the back of an announcement only yesterday by the Royal Children's Hospital that as a result of the cuts in Commonwealth funding to the Victorian State Government in relation to hospitals, that 50 job losses have now occurred.
The state government also slashed $616 million from its own health budget, according to the Federal Health Minister.
No, these bed closures are a direct result of the Commonwealth cuts to the Victorian government and to the hospital's budget. You know, they would like to try and blur the lines here and say it's somebody else's responsibility. That is their default reaction in all circumstances, to blame someone else. They will never simply take responsibility. The fact is, the Health Minister, Tanya Plibersek, needs to take responsibility for these cuts. I think the Victorian Health Minister said she is going to go down as perhaps the cruelest federal health minister in our nation's history, and I've got to say, I do agree with him.
Nick Champion, what's your response? Quite a bit to respond to there.
Well, quite a bit indeed. Look, the problem with Liberal state governments is they're all care and no responsibility, and this is just another example.
That's your government.
Well, just Kelly, I gave you a more than fair go. We had to listen to your diatribe for, you know, a long time.
Okay, let's get
into it. Give me a fair go before you interrupt. This is a dialogue, not a one-way street. Look, the problem for Liberal governments is that they promise a world, and then when they get into power, they deliver cuts and to the hospital budget in this case, and cuts elsewhere. And we've seen that from Queensland to Victoria. We've seen job cuts under Campbell Newman, under Barry O'Farrell, and under Ted Baillieu, and that's because they're pursuing these ideology of austerity, of cutting budgets, of an obsession with debt at a time when the world economy is still struggling with the aftermath of the global financial crisis. And the strategy they're pursuing makes job losses a natural consequence of their actions. And Kelly and others want to go around the country pretending that what state governments do is someone else's fault. It's about time the Liberal Party just takes responsibilities for their political positions.
So, Nick Champion, are you advocating going further into debt to fund these hospitals?
Well, no. Well, what I advocate is sensible reductions of debt over the long term. What I don't advocate is a sort of strategy of austerity where you savagely cut budgets, which is what the British government and what other governments around the world have done, savagely cut budgets, and then what happens is the growth is impacted, and so you get less revenue anyway, and it's like a dog chasing its tail down a well, if you like. Because you've cut your budgets, you cut growth, and because you cut growth, you cut revenues, and so you end up in this terrible situation. And if you look at the Liberal Party around the country, whether it's in Queensland or Northern Territory or Victoria or New South Wales, they do the same thing. They come in, they promise the world, oh, it's all going to be friendly and nothing's going to happen, and then when they get in, it's a nasty story on public service cuts.
OK, look, I'm sorry, we've got to take a break, but we'll be back with more right after this.
Honey, did you get the newspaper? Ah.
Now, where did I put my thank you.
Shall I put the kettle on?
You've always looked after one another, so if one of you were to pass away, it would be a tough time. That's why leaving your better half with an insurance-lined funeral plan is so important. The average funeral can cost over $6,000 these days. But with a funeral plan, you can choose a payout for your loved one, from $2,000 up to $15,000 to help them cover your funeral. They'll have the money fast, within 24 hours of us receiving a complete claim. And affordable plans start from just $6.91 a week for $6,000 of cover for a 60-year-old.
Could you pass me?
You can get cover fast over the phone with no medical tests or forms. And if you're an Australian resident, you're guaranteed acceptance up to age 80 with cover for accidental death only for the first 12 months. Plus, sign up now and we'll send you a free will kit to save you another worry.
Honey, can you put that shelf up like you promised?
So make sure you keep your promise to care for your better half.
For now I love someone.
Call 13 8810 and get an Insurance Line funeral plan today.
With all the pollution, the dust, the dirt and the makeup that's trapped in your pores, your face needs a deep clean each day. Announcing the new Deep Cleansing Brush from Proactive to clean and exfoliate your pores for fresh, radiant skin.
I use the cleansing brush once a day. It scrubs the day off.
And you won't pay $150 or even half that. When you order the Proactive 3-step system, we'll rush you our deep cleansing brush free.
I was so excited about the deep cleansing brush because there's another company that makes one and I really wanted it, but it was $150. So when I got that for free, I was so excited.
The deep cleansing brush works gently with 4,000 microorbits technology and bristles perfect for blemish-prone skin. Order now and get all this for only $29.99 plus postage. Plus, each new season automatically receive a new 3-month supply of Proactive for only $29.99 per month and cancel anytime. Hurry, call 1300 173 536 now.
Think of all the boys who'll die if you don't make peace.
A nation divided.
The great day of reckoning is upon us.
One man had to choose between freedom.
Abolishing slavery settles the fate for all time.
And peace.
Fight like this is to the death.
We are guaranteed to lose.
You insult God.
Blood's been spilt. The fate of human dignity is in our hands.
Lincoln, in cinemas February 7.
Well, the row over the Prime Minister's captain's pick of Nova Peris for the Senate seat in the Northern Territory continues to roll on. I'm joined now by Dan Borscher, our Indigenous and Darwin reporter. Just take us through the latest reaction from the Territory, Dan.
Yeah, David, good morning. Well, the fallout's continued into day 3 today, and most of it centres around, as you point out, the Prime Minister's captain's pick of Nova Peris to be parachuted into that first Senate position for the Northern Territory at the forthcoming federal election. We know that the National Executive yesterday has approved Nova Peris, but also opened up the ballot for one more week. Trish Crossman has said that she will throw a hat in the ring. Up until now, we've heard very little about the other contender for that was going up against Trish Crossman for that Senate seat, and that was Marion Scrimgeour, the Northern Territory's former Deputy Chief Minister under the previous Labor government. She's come out swinging, saying that the Prime Minister was completely out of line in the way that she handled this whole situation. She's also taken a personal aim at Indigenous Affairs Minister Jenny Macklin, saying that they've, quote, crossed swords. Here's a little of what she said.
I've crossed swords with Jenny Macklin, particularly over the intervention in the Northern Territory. I've crossed swords with her over stronger futures. I think that their policies in Northern Territory Aboriginal communities are wrong. They are discriminatory, even though people say that they're not, they are, and they need to be held accountable for it.
Marion Scrimgeour, they're taking particular aim at the Indigenous Affairs Minister Jenny Macklin. She went on to say that she had an idea that Miss Macklin was involved in this decision to choose Nova Peris, particularly so that Miss Scrimgeour wouldn't have an opportunity to run for that Senate seat. At this stage, Miss Scrimgeour isn't clear over whether she'll recontest or whether she'll even run as an independent. There's been some speculation up here. Miss Scrimgeour also responded to the comments made by Alison Anderson, the Northern Territory's Indigenous Advancement Minister, where she yesterday referred to Nova Peris as a maid of the Labor Party. Ms Scrimgeour says those comments were completely out of line and offensive, and has called on the NT Indigenous Advancement Minister to apologise. We know that, David, that there's been an enormous divide on this issue around the country, but nowhere more so than in the Indigenous community. And while there's been many leaders here in the Northern Territory saying that it's simply has been the wrong process, there have been very prominent leaders who have said that they support Nova Peris, in the case of former Senator Aidan Ridgway, as well as the former Chief of the Labor Party, Warren Mundine. So it just goes to show that this debate is not over yet, and I don't think it will be until we see a senator chosen to run for the Northern Territory. And I imagine this will lead up right until the federal election, David.
Okay, Dan, thank you. Nick Champion, what should the Prime Minister have done differently, if anything?
Well, look, I think the Prime Minister was responding to a genuine need that's been felt in the Labor Party for a long time to have an Indigenous representative, and I think you know, we're playing a bit of catch-up footy behind the Liberal Party, which have been quite good on this matter, so I'll save Kelly interjecting. But so I think the Prime Minister's been, you know, responding to a genuine need, and I think it's perfectly reasonable that she should endorse a candidate, that she should put the weight of her office and her name behind a candidate, and Nova Peris is obviously a very well-qualified candidate for public office. But I do think that the National Executive, while accepting Nova Peris's membership of the Labor Party and her nomination, I do think that they should conduct a rank-and-file ballot in the Territory. It's the appropriate way, I think, of selecting candidates, and I think that would lead to a better outcome, a less contentious outcome, and there'd be less complaints about process, I think, if we simply had a rank-and-file pre-selection. I don't think Nova's afraid of running hard races. She's done it, you know, before, and she'll do it in a rank-and-file ballot for the Labor Party.
So did the Prime Minister, by bypassing that process, act inappropriately then?
Well, I think that's the wrong word. Look, there's been this idea around amongst modern Labor leaders. The Prime Minister's not the first Labor leader to have this idea that they should select candidates on high. I don't think that that's the best way to go. I think we're nearly always better having rank-and-file involvement in the pre-selections. I think it leads to better processes, basically lead to better outcomes. And I think that that's something that the National Executive should take into account when they make their decision.
Kelly O'Dwyer, is this an issue that warranted the Prime Minister's intervention to try to increase Indigenous representation in federal Parliament?
Well, I think, frankly, the Prime Minister was quite embarrassed about the fact that they have talked and talked and talked themselves red in the face about how much they care for Indigenous people and all the things that they're apparently going to do, that she has actually been shamed into this. Warren Mundine, the former president of the party, has in fact acknowledged this, that his resignation from the party probably prompted some action from the Prime Minister. And Nick is right to say that the Labor Party is playing catch-up on this. What he didn't say, though, is that they're 40 years behind. We had a senator elected, Senator Neville Bonner, in Queensland, who was the first Aboriginal member of the federal parliament. And of course, we have the fantastic Ken Wyatt, who serves so ably in Western Australia. So, you know, the Labor Party is definitely paying catch-up. But I think the fallout that we have seen from this, again, reminds everybody about the division in the Labor Party. We've seen Nick Champion only today say that he doesn't think that this was the right thing to do, that you ought to have a rank-and-file pre-selection process. And frankly, you know, who can really argue with that, a rank-and-file pre-selection process? But the Prime Minister, of course, she's been no stranger to knifing people.
We're going to have to wrap you up there, Kelly. We're out of time. Sorry to interrupt, but we are out of time. Kelly O'Dwyer, Nick Champion, thanks for your company and thanks for watching.
Count the number of batteries you rely on every day. Now multiply it by 7.6 million households As the demand for battery power increases, plan for a positive future today with your own Battery World franchise.
All day at the shop, then a night of BAS, wages, creditors and reconciling the bank accounts. I can't remember the last time I made it home in time for dinner with the kids.
Give us your books and we'll give you back your life.
I'm behind on invoicing and my husband's suppliers are chasing him for payments. There has to be a better way to manage our accounts.
So give us your books and we'll give you back your life.
Are you struggling to balance the bookkeeping side of your business? Call First Class Accounts now. Our professional national network of qualified bookkeepers